Hey everybody, Dr. Impact here for another episode of Dr. Impact's Quarantine Comic Book Prescription. This week, we are going to be talking about the 2013 Dynamite series based on Doc Savage. Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, an 8-issue series with one annual. You'll hear some thunder and maybe even see some lightning or something, kind of trying to peek through the window here. It's raging outside as I record this. So before I get into the Dynamite books, I do want to say that I am a fan of the original Doc Savage novels. Obviously, we're still all packed up here, awaiting the stay-at-home orders to be lifted so that we can start shooting our fan film based on the Mighty Crusaders. As you can see, they're all up here behind me. Obviously that's not the case right now, so we have a lot of stuff in boxes, but I do have a couple of the Doc Savage books that I did keep out. Some of my favorites that, depending on how long this stay-at-home order goes, I may like to try to reread. I read Doc Savage for the first time, I would say I was somewhere around 14, maybe 13, something like that. And I actually did not start with the first book. The first Doc Savage book I ever read is the 8th book in the Bantam series, but the Bantam series from the 60s themselves were reprints of the original Pulp magazines and novels from the 30s and 40s. So it's the reprint issue number 8, but in the original run, in the original order, it is the second Doc Savage adventure, The Land of Terror. This was my introduction to Doc Savage because I am a sucker for dinosaurs of any kind, man. Doesn't matter what it is, I'm just a sucker for them. The one thing that I've always found interesting is that Doc has never quite latched on to the comic book scene fully. I think Dell or Gold Key did one, and then various different underground companies have done them. Marvel had a run of Doc Savage for a while. DC had a run of Doc Savage for a while, twice or 3 times maybe, I think. And one of those times, I think they even tried to integrate him into the DC multiverse somehow, like he was on a separate Earth with a 30s version, like a noir version of Batman and the Shadow, and I don't know, it just, Anyway, I like Doc Savage in all incarnations, but the comics just never quite captured what the books were. 2013, Chris Roberson, not to be confused with original Doc Savage writer, pen name, Kenneth Robeson. Chris Roberson did the Dynamite series. Now, the Dynamite series is very interesting because it is 8 issues in an annual. The annual doesn't really seem to tie in much to the rest of the series. The 8 issues, however, each one takes place in a different decade. And as such, they had to find some way for Doc's life to extend. So he had taken some sort of miracle cure drug thing in the early issues of the series that extended his life. So therefore, he could be an adventurer in the 20s and the 30s, and he can be a veteran of World War I and still be alive in 2013 or 14, whenever these were made. As a Doc Savage fan, as a hardcore fan, this isn't really Doc Savage. The first couple of issues are. The issues that take place in the 30s, the 40s, and I think the third issue is in the late 50s or 1960, one of the two. And those are pretty close. But by the third issue, the rest of his team that he has working with him, Ham and Monk and Long Tom and all those guys, they're starting to get older and either die or retire. So there are new team members coming in. If you look at this series as an Elseworlds pseudo real-time take on Doc Savage, then it's great. Then it's really fun, and it does kind of capture, for the most part, some of the essence of the original novels. But as far as like a straight-on Doc Savage, not really. In fact, I actually found that the annual, which is a different creative team and doesn't connect to the overall story of the 8 issues, because of course this is a story, you know, each issue takes place in a different decade, but it is a long story that connects all 8 issues. The annual doesn't do that. The interesting thing about the annual is that it almost acts as a prequel or a 0 issue to the original novel, in a sense. Now, when you read the original novel, the very first novel, The Man of Bronze, Doc and his team, they're already a team. They've already gone on a couple of adventures together. So the interesting thing is that the comic kind of sets the stage right before that. The novel also talks about how Doc's father, Clark Savage Sr., has gone off on a different expedition. Well, the annual talks about how Doc and his team are going to meet up with Doc's father, but they're too late. His father has already left for the expedition that they're talking about in this book. So that was very cool. And that is what I wanted more of from a Doc Savage comic. You know, Doc Savage is the first superhero, in my opinion, and I think many other people. He predates Superman, he predates Batman, he predates everybody. Doc Savage is the first to have a secret base in the novels that he goes to, which is located in the Arctic, that he does call the Fortress of Solitude. Superman's name is Clark Kent. Doc Savage's name is Clark Savage. Batman is a millionaire who is perfectly trained physically and has every imaginable gadget that you can think of. Doc did that first. Doc has an unending supply of money, and he always has the latest toys and the latest gadgets. So he is ideal and ripe for comic books. I really enjoyed the annual. I really enjoyed the whole series on a whole. It just didn't quite capture the novels the way I was really hoping it would. Well, that's it for this week. That's this week's New to You Comic Book Day read for me, and this week's topic on Dr. Impact's quarantine comic book prescription. Not sure what we're going to talk about next week. In the very first episode of this, I did talk about how I was starting to make my way through Valiant, the 2012 Valiant. I am still doing that, so figured there is probably an episode of that coming very, very soon. And new comics are starting to return, so we'll see how long we keep doing the quarantine prescriptions. Maybe they just become Dr. Impact's comic book prescriptions. We'll see. But until next time, that's it, guys. So once again, share with us what are new to you this week for your New to You Comic Book Day reads. Film a video of yourself, share pictures, go to our social media. Please, we really enjoy interacting with you guys. And as always, don't forget, check out my Big Fat Pull List Patreon page. There's a lot of really cool stuff on there. And if you want us to go into any depth on any of the stuff that we talk about here on this, or on any of the other things that we've talked about in the podcast itself, there is a great tier on the Patreon page where you can actually pick an episode for the podcast itself. So, until next time, guys, stay safe and read comics.